Welcome to part 2 of our exploration below Leeds Station. In this video we're going to continue deeper underground and follow an old waterway, with old road bridges over the waterway still visible, but way below what is today the streets of Leeds. But before we start to explore, let's just get you up to speed with what the waterway was used for and what happened to it. As we showed you in the previous episode, the River Aire used to run its course on a different path through Leeds. Not like today, or the last 150 years at least. The River Aire now takes a sharp turn underneath the station viaducts. The old route of the River Aire did still continue for many years after, although a much smaller but navigable route, now called the Kingsmill Goyt. A goyt is a rare word used to describe a channel or conduit of water, normally redirected or man-made stream, often used to power machinery or mills. And that's exactly what this one did. The clue is in the name. It powered the Kingsmill complex that was located on what is today Sovereign Street in Leeds. It was a huge complex of mills and they were demolished sometime in the early 1900s. The goyt was used to siphon water through this complex to power the mills, and eventually exited towards the end of the Cols and back into the River Aire. As you can see from this route, most of it today has disappeared beneath the giant glass blocks of Leeds, but the sections under the station haven't. The goyt used to run through open sections as marked on this image, where it would disappear again below ground. The upgrades of Leeds New Station and Queen's Hotel caused many of these sections to be hidden away and culverted below. We're not sure when the goyt stopped flowing, but what we do know is that it doesn't anymore, as you will see in this video. So let's continue our explore and start in the tunnels underneath the main station platforms. So let's head through this door here and out onto the banks of the River Aire as it heads underneath Leeds Station. You can hear the water flowing already as we got to this point. And there's that doorway again on the other side. So it looks like an escape hatch of some kind. But here we are, on the balcony overlooking the arches. And you can just see there, if I get my torchlight bright enough, the pillars that support the car park above, the multi-storey car park and the road, what used to be the Wellington Station. Now the water levels of the River Aire are quite low today, so you're not going to see much in terms of water until we get right to the end arch. But you can see all the silt that's built up over many years down here. Now I am assured it is cleaned out every couple of years. So apparently there's 9 arches underneath here, with the first 2 or 3 used quite regular, and then the last 5 or 6 barely get used unless we're in flood season. Now here we're looking at an old archway. You can see it's been bricked up, but this was the entrance into the Kingsmill Goyt as it flowed straight forward from the River Aire and continued underneath that arch there. So now we're looking at the other arches that head underneath Leeds Station that carry the River Aire, and you can just see the lip of the weir there. Now that weir has always been there right back into the 1800s. And the huge concrete pillars there that support the car park and roadway above. This is a new section. When I say new, I'm probably talking 1960s. So we're just heading on the banks of the silt there. And if you look up, you can see the concrete section. And an old culvert pipe here that heads into the site, probably from the drains above. And then back to where that tunnel is, you can just see the brick arch again that's been bricked up. So that was the entrance into the Kingsmill Goyt, as the water would have continued straight forward. So here's a closer look inside one of the arches. And as you can see, it's pretty dry, apart from some pooling water. But that's because, like I said, the river is quite low today. Now they just look really scary. And here we've got an old, what we presume was a sluice gate of some sort. Now, somebody did say it could be one of those trout ladders. That sounds like something on a night out in Leeds, doesn't it? And then down into one of the second arches there. Now, at the end of these arches, it does sort of go off at an angle, which is why you can't see the other end. It's only the first 2 arches or 3 arches that head straight through and out of the station. The other 6 are channelled into the other 3. But you can see we're now at water's edge. And I think this is arch number 3 or 4. And the water is only just appearing here. And I look back again at the concrete sections that are underneath the car park today. Now, I was told a story as well. If you remember the floods we had a couple of years back, an old pontoon from up in Kirkstall broke loose and floated down the river. Well, I'm told by the guy who took us around, it ended up in here and he had to dislodge it. So look at this rusty old doorway, taken a battering over many years from the River Aire behind. And then into this section here, which is where the Kingsmill Goyt would have continued straight through here, left to right. And as you can see, it's been bricked up and reinforced with these steel girders at the bottom here to hold back the water. And then a modern breeze block wall there. But this is the chamber where the river would have continued straight through, and probably slightly deeper than what it is today. So we're going to head down this old rusty staircase here, and down to what would have probably been the level of the Goyt or the river. And here we are in a former tunnel of the old Kingsmill Goyt, and you can see how it changes its direction slightly. It curves to the right there as it heads underneath the Queen's Hotel, which is where we are now. But it has been used for many years as storage and for many other reasons, as you can see by the concrete and the brick plates on the floor there. And it's been painted as well, but this would have been the original tunnel for the river, or the Goyt. Like I said, I'm guessing this was probably bricked up sometime in the 60s, maybe even earlier, maybe when the Queen's Hotel was built in the 1930s. And just a look back up there to the old arches, as you can see, they're built as the river or the Goyt changes direction. A little hatchway here in one of the walls that shows the old stonework behind. I love anything like this. So you can see the original walls of the culvert there, or the tunnel. Now, like I said, this section from the Queen's Hotel would have been covered over when the Queen's Hotel was probably built. Now let's head through into the next section, which is where the Kingsmill Goyt would have continued from left to right, straight through this tunnel here. So what we're looking at now, the wall at the far distance there, is the back of the old Shabab's restaurant that was in Leeds. And from left you're coming from the River Aire, and on the right you're heading down towards Swinegate. So this is the original covered over section that would have been open, and this, like I said, was covered over when Leeds New Station was extended, because now above it you have the roadway, and the large building outside Leeds Station sits directly above here as well. It's hard to believe that this level here, and you can see the arch on the far side, would have been another river continuing straight forward in the original River Aire. Now, as you can see, as we approach the arch right here, it says no smoking. So we do believe that this room may have been used at some point as an air raid shelter. We can't confirm that, but it was suspected. Now we are going to head through that door shortly at the end. Now, right there, I believe, is the edge of Neville Street. So what you're looking at there is the bridge of Neville Street, which is now buried below. And we're going to head underneath Neville Street, as you will see shortly, which is the original route of the Goyt. This is under Neville Street now. Now this section here has been it's just untouched totally. It's not been disturbed in any way, apart from backfilled many years ago. But you can still see some of the old cable trays on the wall, or the metal sections that would have carried cables and things underneath the road. maybe utilities as well. And you can see how deep it's been infilled there. But this is amazing. This is something I never thought I would see, and I remember talking about it on the last time I did a video about this section from the outside and speculating that it was still there under the street. Well, here it is, although no water flowing today. But just look at the intricacy of that brickwork. Now, Neville Street has been upgraded throughout the years. Again, it's been widened. There's various sections that are new. So I'm going to take it that this section we're in now is the original Neville Street section. And you can see the various old bridges here underneath what would have been old roads that ran over the top before the station was built on top of this section. So you're talking when they built the Leeds New Station and the viaducts, these would have all been built over the top of old road bridges that used to run through this, what was an open site at the time. Now check this out. 2 old piers there, or mooring posts, a bit like what we found under the Mersey Tunnel in Liverpool and the old dock there. So they would have brought barges up here at this section and used those mooring posts there to dock up and unload the goods. And it's also worth mentioning, on an old map, if you look at that, along the side of the Goyt here used to be old mills long before the station was built. There's some huge bits of timber here that have fallen away, that they used to be in that wall there. So we think these may have been like the edge of the river for the boats to moor up against. And you can see the huge hole that they've come out of. And then again, another bridge section here. It reminds me a little bit of underneath Sheffield Station when we did that. Very similar, the old sections of bridges from the roads above that don't exist. Now this section is directly underneath the end of Neville Street where it meets the station viaduct. And what we're looking at here is the road bridge on the right and then the station building under the viaduct on the left. And then finally we've reached the other side of Neville Street now. And what we're going to do, you'll see the concrete above. That's what is at the other side of Neville Street now, behind the wall. And it's now a car park area. And you'll see that shortly when we come out. But you can see the sloping roof as it slopes down. That's where the cars come in and drive down into the car park. And this, I don't think is that old. I mean, it does look fairly new. I'm probably going to say 20, 30 years old. But we're walking directly underneath it. And again, on the route of the old Kingsmill Goyt. And we just found these old tins at the side here, with an old ladle inside, a rusty ladle. That's a good name for a pub, that, isn't it? Lots of old relics down here. Okay, so we're now in the car park area. So this is at the other side of Neville Street, underneath the arches. And you can see on the right hand side, the concrete ramp coming down. So that's where the Goyt would have travelled through, as I'm pointing out there. And through this arch, straight forward, as you can see. So we're now still a bit higher than the river level. This car park, like I said, is built across or inside the arches, covering anything that used to be there, but the bridge still remains. Now I do believe there was a road that used to run through the site as well, a bit like Neville Street, and that bridge is what used to cross that bridge there. And look back down that concrete ramp that we just walked underneath. So the river continued directly under our feet there. Now here is also where the Goyt used to split off, and there used to be a weir directly in front of us there through those 2 arches. So it did separate at this point, and it joined the River Aire again further down underneath the station, and then it also continued, like I said, through that stone arch in front. And that was where the Kingsmill complex was, a bit further forward. As you can see here, we're out onto Neville Street, just to give you a heads up of exactly where we are. So we walked under the tunnel, directly under the road there, which is where the Goyt used to run. And as you can see, it's now quite wide on Neville Street, but it would have been a narrow street running through the station at one point, before the new girder bridge was built above. And there's the doorway, with the car park behind. So we're now on the other side of the station, and we're now towards where the Kingsmill complex would have been. And this arch here, or one of them, is where the weir used to exit the site. And this is now what used to be the Kingsmill complex. You're only seeing a fraction of it here, but all the south side of the station there, right down to the river edge, was the Kingsmill complex. They're now building a modern hotel right in the centre, so we're going to head up there shortly on top of their staircase. And here we are in one of the arches that I believe is one of the tunnels to the side that carried another road through. Now that road used to head directly under the station and out the other side, but the many changes over the years, that's long gone. So the bridge that you saw carrying the Goyt through, I believe, is to my left, and the road, this is the road that went over it. But you can see the various sections here. Again, old stonework, brickwork from various decades of additions. So we do think as well there may have been lots of mills and factories under here. The old maps show all sorts of different businesses in these arches, but today, as you can see, it's used for car parking. It's so fascinating down here what you can see. And looking back down through the arches here underneath the station. So we just made it into one of the arches that head between Swinegate and Neville Street. And again, you can see some evidence here, look, of another arch as the river would have made its way, or the Goyt, I keep calling it a river, it was a Goyt. As the Goyt made its way straight forward there, again, lower level down there. But it would have headed straight through here and then headed out of the final arch near Swinegate. And yet again, you can clearly see right there the stonework for the original viaduct that was here, and then it just changes right there into the red brick, which is the extensions that they made to this viaduct so they could add extra lines above. And I believe it was probably the 1960s that they did all that, when they made Leeds New Station into Leeds City Station. So here we are on top of the new hotel complex, having a look over the site of what used to be the Kingsmill complex, or part of it anyway. So the weir would have been where that crane is, running straight down to the River Aire. Thank you very much for joining us. I hope you enjoyed our look underneath Leeds Station. I'll see you next week in the next video. Bye for now.